Over the last decade, we've really started to see the fine line between the mainstream and luxury brands start to get blurred. On one end of the spectrum, I have this 2019 Subaru Forester Touring, the fully loaded version of the car, equipped with some premium features that you really expected in a luxury car about 10 years ago, like leather, heated steering wheel, heated seats, panoramic sunroof, navigation, their eyesight driver assist. This has features that a lot of luxury cars had about 10 years ago that were just not available on the mainstream brand. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, you have this all-new 2019 Cadillac XT4 Premium Luxury. This is the company's new small compact luxury SUV with stickers for an eye-watering $55,000, a full 20 grand more than that Subaru. And really the only premium feature it has is massaging seats and some nicer leather on the interior, in addition to a turbo engine. Now, splitting the difference between the two, or between the mainstream and the luxury brands, is this 2019 Mazda CX-5 Signature, equipped with a new turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It's actually the most powerful vehicle here and splits the difference between the two in terms of price. Now, obviously, I can't compare all three of these guys head to head, but what I want to know is it actually worth it to purchase the luxury brand over the mainstream brand, or should you just seek something that occupies the gray area like this Mazda? That's what we're here to find out. So even though these are all SUVs, they're technically family cars, design is obviously an important aspect. It's what draws a consumer in when they first are looking for a vehicle like this. But let me first talk about the Mazda in terms of its exterior design. The first thing I want to comment on is the exterior color. This soul red crystal paint costs $595, and honestly, in this light, it looks like a $5,000 paint job, much better looking than the red that Subaru paints on the new Forester. Now, obviously with the look, it's got that corporate Kodo design theme that Mazda is known for. It's got that 5-point grille. LED headlights are actually standard across the board on all trims. This one also has LED fog lights, and overall it has a very sleek concept car-like look that really stands out. This car's been on the market for about 3 years now, and it definitely still looks very expensive and looks very fresh. Now, in contrast, let's take a look at the Cadillac here. This has a bold, brash American look. It looks a little bit wider than the Mazda because it is. It's got a very much larger grille here, which is kind of a signature theme here. It's like a shield-like grille, kind of similar to the Mazda with its own unique finish. This one here is the premium luxury trim. Cadillac also offers a sport trim that has a little bit more of an aggressive front fascia. LED headlights are actually optional on the luxury brand, if you can believe it. Halogens are going to be standard. You do have an LED running light that kind of is a little bit more distinctive than the Mazda as it goes from the top of the fender down to the lower part. No fog lights on the Cadillac, but overall, it's definitely got a unique, bold look to it. I just don't know if it actually looks better than the Mazda, which is something that, again, some of you may be comparing if you're going to be looking in this class. Now, in contrast with the Subaru, this has a little bit more of a conservative, tailored back, kind of mom look to the front fascia. It looks barely different versus what they had on the previous generation Forester. You have the same Hawkeye-like headlights. This one here has LED headlights with LED fog lights and then an LED running light, but just incandescent turn signals. The LEDs are actually optional. If you guys go for the base trim levels of the Forester, you're going to have halogen projectors, which is kind of the norm in this segment. Mazda definitely goes a little bit beyond and further apart from the competition. Now, when you also look at the side profile of the Subaru, you're going to notice this has the most conventional look. It's actually the biggest vehicle here. It's the longest vehicle. It has the most interior space. I don't particularly like the wheels that Subaru puts. These are an 18-inch wheel. They're what you get on the Touring trim. They just look a little too basic for me. It doesn't really stand out, but it will give this car a much better ride quality. Now, in contrast, the Cadillac is actually just about an inch shorter than the Subaru, although you wouldn't be able to tell It's got the biggest wheels. Those are 20-inch wheels that are optional. It's like a $1,000 option, but you can cut out either a 5-spoke wheel or the multi-spokes like you get on this one. This is the biggest wheel out of the 3 here, so it doesn't really surprise me. It's got the widest tires. This is supposed to be the luxury-oriented model, and with luxury vehicles, they tend to have bigger wheels. Now, the Mazda is actually the smallest vehicle here. This one at 179 inches long is about 2 inches shorter than the Cadillac, 3 inches shorter than the Subaru. It's got 19-inch wheels, so it kind of splits the difference between the 20s on the Cadillac and the 18s on the Subaru. I think they look a little bit small. They have this unique gray finish to them, and the Mazda definitely looks the sleekest from the side, but it kind of resembles a little bit more like a hatch instead of an SUV like the Subaru, because that one has the highest ground clearance. Now, looking at the rear design of these 3 crossovers, you can see the Subaru definitely has, again, the most conventional and maybe even weirdest look. This is the most controversial element of the new Forester. It has a very much like lobster claw shape to the taillights, which are a combination LED and incandescent. You can definitely tell that Subaru favored practicality because the hatch is much larger, which I'll open up the hatch in just 1 second. Now, in contrast, the Mazda's rear definitely mimics the front with these LED combination taillights. They're very small. It looks a little bit more like a hatchback. You really couldn't tell. I like the dual exhaust, which is absent from the Subaru, kind of giving this car a little bit more of a premium look. It also is significantly lower. This car only has 7.3 inches of ground clearance to the 8.7 that the Subaru gives you, which kind of gives you a more rugged look. Now, in contrast, the Cadillac has a very Saab kind of Volvo look. It's got these very tall vertical stacked LED taillights in here, which are kind of a combination because the reverse lights are down here and they're just an incandescent. You also have these rectangular dual exhausts, which look a little bit nicer versus the Mazdas, which are a little bit too small, but the Cadillac, again, tries to give you that sportier, hunkered down, lower look. Now, let's look at the cargo capacity. All 3 of these vehicles have power tailgates, and the Cadillac's is actually the smallest here in terms of the space. When you open up the rear hatch area, you can see it only has around 22 cubic feet of space. That's barely more than what you get in a sedan. If you fold down the second row seats, you're looking at around 49, 48 cubic feet of space. So again, pretty small in terms of the numbers. Now, the Mazda is not that much larger than the Cadillacs. It also has a power liftgate as well, which comes on this trim. And when you open up the rear hatch of the Mazda, Mazda actually says it's rated at around 30.9 cubic feet of space. It doesn't look like it's that much, but when you fold down the second row, Mazda says you're getting around 59 cubic feet of space, which is again about 10 more than what you get in the Cadillac. Now, moving on to the Subaru, of course, I said it had a very conventional look. This is a family vehicle first and foremost, not a sporty vehicle. And when you open up the rear hatch of this vehicle, Subaru says this is around 30.9 cubic feet of space, which is actually matching that of the Mazda, but it looks considerably larger. It's just a very wide opening. So obviously this is the most practical vehicle. If you fold down those seats, Subaru says you're getting at around 72 cubic feet of space. So again, 10 or about 12 more than what you get on the Mazda, almost 20 more than what you get in the Cadillac. Now, I'm going to do a brief overview of the interiors for all these cars, but keep in mind, I'm just going to try to shorten this because I've done full reviews on all 3 of these cars. Now, first getting into the Subaru, you're going to notice quite a few things. This is the most family-oriented car, so it has the most interior space. It's a very open and airy cabin. The visibility in here is excellent. The seats are actually really comfortable. They're really soft. They are just heated. You have a heated steering wheel. You have their Subaru Starlink infotainment system. You have their EyeSight driver assist technology. It's a really comfortable car. It has Apple CarPlay. It has Android Auto. It has a premium Harman Kardon sound system. It's overall very conventional. I kind of get into this car. I know exactly how to use it. When you start the vehicle up, you can see it doesn't really give you any frills. You have 3 displays kind of showing all the kind of information. Subaru updated that display over here this year, which gives you a much beautiful looking graphic. You can see the map display. It's basically a TomTom navigation, kind of looks a little bit aftermarket, a little bit on the lower end. And then when you put the vehicle into reverse, you can see it's got a traditional backup camera with trajectory. Really good looking resolution actually for just being mainstream. It has rear cross-traffic braking and parking sensors. So it's all relatively good, easy to use. Definitely doesn't feel luxury here, but let's hop into the back seat. And you can see, continuing with that family-friendly theme back here, the back seat is gigantic. Subaru rates the space at around 39.5 inches of legroom. As you can see here, the seats are also raised up slightly. I love the panoramic sunroof letting in a lot of light. I can see the best out of this car. Again, really big windows, really comfortable seats as well. The leather feels nice. You actually have heated seats back here, 2 levels. You have 2 USB charging cables, rear seat vents. You have 2 levels of storage here. One can actually fit your phone. And then the materials, they're kind of hard touch plastic. They're mimicking what you get in the front seats. But obviously there's a reason why a lot of people buy the Forester, because this is easily the most practical on the inside, the roomiest, the biggest trunk, and it's definitely the one that a lot of families are going to be going after. So going down the line in price here, this is the interior of the $39,000 Mazda CX-5. And you can see, in contrast to the Subaru, this interior looks damn expensive compared to the Subaru. And I know Subaru's been trying, but Mazda's interior just feels much more classy, much more elegant. It has kind of an Audi, BMW-like look to it with the tablet-style screen. It's a 7-inch display. You have some, faux stitching on the dash, just like you had on the Subaru, but with the wood and the alloy trim, it just looks a lot more expensive. Now, this car has a couple of features the Subaru doesn't have. 360 camera is one of them. It also has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It has a heads-up display, which is nice. And then the gauge display here just looks a little bit classier, a little bit nicer. Now, the leather in this vehicle also is a Nappa premium leather. It's very soft and supple. The seats are also heated and cooled. So the Subaru doesn't offer cooled seats. You have a heated steering wheel as well. And then the rest of the center stack here, you can see instead of Mazda's touchscreen infotainment system, this is the old one here, is also a touchscreen when you're parked, but you're going to be using this command wheel most of the time. You have, kind of like an Audi MMI interface here. You have really nice feeling buttons that kind of move really nice. I mean, this car definitely feels a lot nicer, but it also feels more cramped. You just don't have as much of an open and airy feel. You don't have the same kind of visibility with the Subaru. And the seats, they are more comfortable, but again, they kind of feel like they've been tailored to skinnier people. The Subaru feels like it's just much more open and spacious. Now let's hop in the back seat really quick of the Mazda. Now, in going with the smaller theme in the back seat here, you can see the second row room is definitely a lot more tight. It doesn't feel as open because the sunroof is a little bit smaller. The legroom here is only around 36.5 inches, which is about 3 inches less than the Subaru. You have a little bit more of a hump here. Thankfully, Mazda still gives you rear seat vents. You have map pockets here, but not quite as much storage. But the materials are nicer in the back seat. So again, going with that Mazda premium theme, you have 3-level heated seats here, and then Mazda puts 2 USB ports in the center console here. So definitely, if you're planning to fit kids back here or put a car seat, the Mazda definitely is on the cramped side. But let's head to the luxury brand and see how the interior looks for that one. So last but not least, let's move into the $55,000 Cadillac. My God, this car is expensive. Now, the first thing you're going to notice, it has the most color in the interior. This brown interior definitely looks good with the gray outside. It definitely makes this car look a little bit more special. I mean, starting the vehicle up, the chime is very traditional GM, so I'm a little sad to see, that kind of feature not be changed to kind of differentiate this from other Chevy or, GMC products. But the interior, as you can see, definitely has much more upscale materials. And like the faux stitching you get in the 2 mainstream cars, this has real leather covering the dash with the contrast stitching. It's covering the door panels as well. And the steering wheel, as you can see, it's also power tilt telescoping. You don't get that on the mainstream brands. Now, just like the Mazda, the seats are very soft leather. They're heated and cooled, and they also have a massage feature, so that's really nice. Now, unfortunately, the massage just kind of makes this lumbar area kind of move in and out, so it's not the best massage that I've seen, like Volvo, for example, that has really good massage, or Mercedes, but it's nice that Cadillac does that. Now, just like the Mazda, when you put the vehicle into reverse, you do have a 360 camera. The screen itself definitely looks a lot more bright. It's much more clear. You have different views you can look through. It also has an automatic parallel parking feature, so that's something that the Mazda doesn't offer, but I believe the Subaru does. Now, just like the Mazda, you also have a head-up display, which is nice. The gauges could look a little bit more fancy, same with some of the switchgear in here, but overall, this interior looks a little bit nicer. You have a couple of, cooler features like the rear-view camera mirror. I just don't know if it's worth the $20,000 or $15,000 increase in the price tag, but overall, if you guys like the design of this interior, which I don't particularly love, you definitely see an improvement in the materials. But let's hop into the back seat real quick. Now, getting into the back seat of the XT4, Cadillac actually says that the space back here is around 39.5 inches of legroom. That matches that of the Subaru, but it definitely doesn't feel that way. You have a little bit of a hump here. This front seat's been pushed a little bit back, but you can see I'm 5'7". It does feel cramped. It feels kind of cramped the way that the Mazda does. So again, with a luxury brand, you usually give up the space in the back seat, and that's definitely the case here. The materials are all high quality. It's all soft touch with the real leather stitching. You have rear seat vents. You have heated rear seats, and then a USB-C and a USB port as well. But overall, I mean, this definitely feels cramped like the Mazda, so there's a reason why the mainstream brands obviously give you more space. This is still usable, but just know that the Cadillac, even though it's almost as big as the Subaru, is not as big in the back seat. So you guys always love how I compare the door slamming noises, so let's start with the mainstream car first. And with the Subaru, It sounds okay, although I do feel the structure kind of shaking a little bit, so it doesn't feel quite as solid as I would like it to. Let's move over to the Mazda. So the Mazda's door definitely has a much more solid thunk. And the structure doesn't quite shake as much as the Subaru, but let's move over to the $55,000 Cadillac. You know, surprisingly, the Cadillac doesn't really sound that solid. It's kind of a very shaky feel and it sounds a little tinny. So it's a little disappointing considering this has the highest price tag. Now, another big distinction between a mainstream brand and a luxury brand is what's going on underneath the hood. So let's first take a look at the mainstream car, the Subaru. Now, there was a time where Subaru used to offer a turbo engine on the Forester. Unfortunately for this new one, the turbo engine is gone. And when you lift up the hood of this one that has a prop rod, there it is. You're going to find the company's signature 2.5 liter Boxer Flat 4. This engine is basically the same motor we've seen that Subaru have been using for years. It's been slightly updated this year and makes 182 horsepower and 176 pound-feet of torque. Those are decent numbers, very class competitive, nothing that's going to really, blow you away in terms of power. It all goes out through a linear-tronic CVT. Their all-wheel drive system is standard, of course, and it gets the best gas mileage here at 26 in the city, 33 on the highway, runs on regular. It weighs around 3,500 pounds. Now, let's move over to the Mazda. This is supposed to split the difference. It's a semi-premium car, what Mazda likes to call it. And when you open up the hood of this one, it's got a very heavy hood, the first time I'm noticing. It also has a prop rod. And Mazda actually added a new engine this year. It's the company's new 2.5 liter Skyactiv G turbocharged engine. So before they basically had this motor without a turbo, and it makes the most power here, 250 horsepower when you guys fill it up with premium and 310 pound-feet of torque. That torque number will surpass even the luxury brands. Now, this vehicle does weigh a pretty good amount more than the Subaru, about 3,800 pounds to 200 pounds heavier. And fuel economy, it is less than the Subaru as well. You got to pay to play, basically. 22 in the city, 27 on the highway. All-wheel drive is going to be standard on this engine configuration because if it didn't have all-wheel drive, it probably would torque steer bad. It all goes out through a 6-speed automatic transmission, so not a CVT like what you get in the Subaru. Now, in contrast, the Cadillac, this is the most expensive car here, so you would think that it has the ballsiest engine, right? Well, it has a 2-liter turbo, so it's not even the biggest engine. The Mazda has the biggest engine, but you can see here it's held up with hydraulics, so it's not actually a prop rod, so that's definitely a nice upscale touch with a premium brand. But it's also turbocharged, just like the Mazda. It makes 237 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. So again, less powerful than the Mazda if you put it with premium. This also recommends premium gas. Now, surprisingly, this gets better gas mileage than the Mazda. 22 in the city, 29 on the highway. Premium gas is recommended, as I said. It all goes out through a 9-speed automatic transmission, with all-wheel drive being like a $2,700 option on this car. So expensive for all-wheel drive, and it also is the heaviest. This one weighs a tick under 4,000 pounds. So obviously the Subaru is the least powerful here. It's probably going to be the slowest, but I'm going to be definitely curious to see how the Mazda and the Cadillac drive between the two vehicles. But let's get them all out on the road and see how they all perform. So starting things off in the Cadillac, I know I've been pretty harsh on this car in terms of the price tag, but I truly do believe that it's overpriced by about $10,000. I mean, at 55 grand, I really think it should be around 45 grand. But anyways, I'm gonna keep the driving parts pretty short because I've got 3 cars to go through, but I'm gonna start with the luxury brand, obviously, at first. Now, the one thing that I'm really liking with the Cadillac, obviously, at first, is the massaging seats. I mean, even though they're not as good as the massaging seats as what you get from like a Volvo or a Mercedes, they kind of just inflate and deflate the bolsters. It's kind of really nice that it has it. The visibility in here is okay. The pillar here is a little bit thick. It's just kind of like chunky pillars here and there, but the rear view camera mirror does help with expanding your rearward visibility because that window back there is pretty small and it does eat into the space. But setting off, the Cadillac definitely has a firmer ride as well. This is not what I would say is your grandfather's Caddy. It feels a little bit on the stiffer side. It actually has a really good feel. The chassis feels solid. So first impression's good. It gives you kind of that, luxury car feel that you associate with a luxury car. And handling wise, it also handles pretty well. And it's also pretty quick. This has a 2-liter turbo with 237 horsepower. 0 to 60 times, they feel around 7 seconds. The last time I drove this car, I was in Seattle. It had decent performance there, and it has decent performance here. It's just not what I would say is like the, what you'd expect from like a BMW or a Mercedes or even an Audi. This feels a little bit heavier, a little bit more sluggish. It definitely feels like it's the heaviest of the 3 vehicles here. Steering feel is a little bit on the light and numb side. The ride quality is good. It's pretty relatively quiet in here. The driver assistance in this car is relatively good as well. It's pretty class competitive, but this is no Super Cruise. I actually kind of wish that Cadillac was using the Super Cruise in this car, but they're not. And I hate how Cadillac also makes you pay extra for it. It's just really disappointing to know that you have to pay extra for the adaptive cruise, the forward collision alert, the safety alert seat. I mean, that's stuff that should be standard on something like this, and GM ends up charging you like around $4,000 for all the driver assistance stuff. So the transmission is also a 9-speed automatic. It works well. This is the only vehicle of the three that actually has paddles on the wheel. The paddles actually work relatively well. I mean, the sportiness of this car, I don't really feel it. It's kind of more, again, like a luxury car. That's what it feels like when you're driving it around. The engine sounds like a stereotypical 4-cylinder. It's just kind of a pleasant car. It's a really great car to me that I would pick up off the rental lot. You know, it doesn't feel completely luxury in here. It still feels a little bit of that GM cheapness, like it shares a platform with the Equinox. But let me hop into the Subaru, the mainstream car, and compare it to this. So after just hopping out of the Cadillac and getting to the Subaru, this car is $20,000 less expensive. So does it feel like it's $20,000 less expensive? Well, in terms of the interior materials, yes, it doesn't feel as expensive in this car, although Subaru's done a pretty good job with elevating their recent crop of interiors. It just kind of feels conventional. This car has a very open and airy cabin. You can see out of it really well. It feels really spacious in here, and that's kind of a Subaru hallmark. The acceleration, you know, this is the naturally aspirated engine. It makes like 50 to 80 horsepower less than the Mazda and the Cadillac. And you know what? Surprisingly, it doesn't feel all that slow. You can credit that to the CVT, which is really responsive. It's just buzzy. It's just really buzzy, but you know, most people probably won't notice the sluggishness of this this car. I mean, 0 to 60 times are considerably slower. This is around 8.8 seconds, something like that. But handling, it's also definitely on the softer side. The suspension is very soft, but it rides nicely enough. It's a pleasant car. It's just a little bit noisier from the engine. The ride is softer for sure. It doesn't handle quite as well. This isn't tuned to be a sporty car. It just feels like a really nice commuter family car, and I've been averaging the best gas mileage in this car at 27 miles per gallon in mixed driving. So obviously the naturally aspirated engine and the CVT make for the best daily driver combination, just not the most fun. This is a little bit of a boring car. Feels a little bit like a mom car, but hey, that's exactly what you bought because you wanted something that was just safe. I mean, the eyesight comes standard. It works very well for the price. I don't mind the infotainment systems in here. Subaru's is very easy to use. I like the new eyebrow display there. So overall, the Subaru is a very pleasant car that I think will please a lot of families out there who aren't looking for the sportiest, or just looking for the most comfortable. So stepping into the Mazda at $39,000, this splits the difference between the Cadillac and the Subaru, and I have to say, the most powerful engine in this group, or in this trio, is definitely noticed. It has a lot of torque, and it's really unexpected, the torque with this car. In fact, it has so much torque, if you turn off the traction control and then floor the accelerator, it will basically spin out its tires, which is interesting because it's an all-wheel drive vehicle. 0 to 60 easily feels like it's around the low 6-second mark. It feels like a half-second quicker than the Caddy, and it's just an absolute riot how this thing will spin out its tires. Even though this is an all-wheel drive car, it's not supposed to do that, but the car's chassis just feels really planted. It feels like I'm driving essentially a hot hatch, essentially. It's a very firm ride. Actually, it's a little on the firmer side. Compared to the Caddy and the Subaru, this is the harshest feeling ride quality of the trio. But, you know, if you're okay with that, it's not like punishingly harsh, it's just noticeably firmer. The steering is the best out of the three. It's the most quick, it has the most feel, the car has the least amount of body roll. Again, you can credit that to the stiff suspension. It's just a really fun car, and that's the thing about the Mazda. It easily wins the fun to drive category. In terms of the most comfortable, is it the most comfortable? No, not really. It definitely feels the most cramped in here at times. The engine also isn't as smooth as the Cadillacs. It actually is a little bit rougher, but it is smoother than the Subarus because the Subaru is a CVT and it's a naturally aspirated engine. No paddles on the wheel, but you can use the manual mode here. It's just so much torque. With 310 foot-pounds, you barely have to rev this motor out. It just makes all the torque all the time. So this is definitely a fun car. Just know that it's not the most practical, it's not the most comfortable, but you're gonna have the biggest smile on your face when you're driving this thing back to back. Oh, and also it got the worst gas mileage out of the three. This was getting around 18 miles to the gallon. The Cadillac was doing around 20 miles to the gallon. The Subaru did around 27 miles to the gallon. So least amount of gears, most torque, biggest engine. Not surprisingly, this is the thirstiest, but it is the quickest. So as today's cars continue to get more advanced, there's simply not really a reason why you need to buy a luxury brand. So let me first start with the Cadillac XT4. This is the most expensive one here at $55,000. While it does have a couple of strengths, love the fact that it offers massaging seats, it definitely has the most bold American look to it. Its turbo engine is good, it rides nice. Its interior has the most premium materials, which you kind of expect that for $55,000. There's just not really a need to purchase this unless you're a badge snob if you want to have a luxury brand. So with that being said, let's move the Cadillac out of the way. And we're going to talk about which one of these two is probably the better option. Now, obviously, Mazda has done a fantastic job with kind of delivering a premium vibe within the mainstream segment. Now, this one at $39,000 is more expensive than the Subaru by $4,000, but because it has that turbo engine, it has a much more premium interior, it definitely keeps it within the running. Now, the Subaru, in contrast, is obviously the more practical option. Its trunk is huge, its rear seat is huge, its interior feels airy, you can see out it well. It really is the option to pick if you guys actually have a family, you plan on carrying people and stuff, you plan on doing some off-roading, because this has the most ground clearance. At $35,000, the new Subaru Forester is a very impressive option. With that being said, which one would I pick between these two? Which one is the better option? Now, personally for me, because I don't need the space, the extra space of the Subaru because I don't have kids, I would probably pick the Mazda, because for $4,000 more, you have a 0 to 60 time that's 2 seconds faster, you have an interior that's much nicer, you have this beautiful styling, this gorgeous red paint, which honestly makes like the Subaru's color look really ugly in comparison. But if you guys actually need the space, you need to carry things, the Subaru is definitely the better pick. Just keep in mind that the Mazda offers a lot of the premium features that you can't get, or that you get on luxury brands at a much significant price tag, but the Subaru is obviously the more family oriented model. So for me personally, because I don't need the practicality, I will pick the 2019 Mazda CX-5 Signature as the winner. Although the Subaru is definitely not a loser, this is still a great option, but for a little bit more money, I would rather have the premium features, the significantly more powerful engine, the sexier styling of the CX-5, which is why, again, I'm going to choose it as the winner. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this cool video between the mainstream, the semi-premium, and the luxury brand. If you guys are also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook. And as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.